Okay, so we have hour and a half, so I'm not gonna sort of torment you all the way to the end with too much content. I wanna leave at least 15 minutes or half an hour for questions. But I do want to, you still have to cover what you do in behavior, and there's a little tiny bit about the mind that I thought was too much for yesterday, so I put it at the front of this lecture. So, Natalia asked me a very good question, which is that when we pick the want, do we do, like, is this the circle about that one want? And that's exactly what it is. You would pursue all of these different techniques on that one thing. But that's, remember on the chart, one want and then all of these different things, but then underneath you can do another one. So when you're pursuing one thing, it's sort of try to focus on one thing at a time, otherwise, and even that's going to be overwhelming. Imagine how much if you were to doing multiple at the same time would be. So one at a time, and then you can kind of move from there. Here's the last bit about the mind. Once you have these thoughts all listed out, there's actually a little bit of work that you can do on the thoughts when you are what I call emotionally cool, which is that when you're not, so when you're emotionally hot, that's a good time to do the Pennebaker exercise, because you require emotionality for the process to work with that exercise. But when you're emotionally cool, you can do this little bit of work. It's based on cognitive behavioral theory. It's like, it's always kind of the same, you'll recognize it. So you basically take each thought and then you go through the series. So here we go. So you have these thoughts. And notice that I took out, there was another column here about situations. Those were just to stimulate your mind about everything. So you can take those out. So now you would have body memories, emotions, thoughts, behaviors, and wants. So notice this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the circle of 5 things basically is spread out across four domains this way and one this way. Does that make sense? So you have wants, body, emotions, thoughts, behaviors. And basically that's the chart that you're working with for each one. So what do you do here? You take each thought. It's too late for me to try X, or I'll never, or you know, I'm not good for anything, whatever the thought is. And you start with the questions. When is the first time you had this thought? Okay, earliest time that you remember you had this thought. What is the situation or emotions that bring about the thought? Notice you're doing this when you're emotionally cool, so you can think, oh yeah, when I'm angry, it shows up. When I'm disappointed or ashamed, that this shows up. And then you start working with it in the way that sort of psychologists would work with it. Like if you were doing cognitive behavioral therapy, it's like, if you make a statement, is it always the case? Like, I'm not good for anything. Like 100% like not for anything. So the idea is to slowly kind of pick apart what fundamentally is a thought that doesn't make any sense, given that it's too global. So I often tell people, how do you know that the belief is not true? It's too global. It's like, I am always this. Nobody is always anything. So usually that's how you will be able to tell these irrational thoughts. And then find 3 credible exceptions. So like a person who is like, I'm not good for anything, but I can make crepes, or but, you know, I'm nice to animals, but, you know, did you see that? Just find 3 things that make sense. Why? Because you're trying to kind of, instead of globally accepting or rejecting thoughts, you're trying to have a little bit of more subtlety and variability in how you think about yourself. So when these things show up, the work that you have previously done on picking it apart would come in as well. So that you can see the thought and say, wow, that's actually not the case. And I don't have to believe this thought. And you can kind of park it. And then you do this really strange thing, which is write exactly the opposite of the thought. Instead of like, I'm not good for anything, I'm good for some things, right? And find 3 credible situations in which that, so it's like this is sort of the sort of exceptions, and then you kind of write it down here, you turn around your board, and you write it down there. So if it's something like, nobody will ever love me, then you find exceptions, then you like, okay, I have people who love me. You put it like, you turn it around and say, oh, you know what, my grandmother loves me. And so you make it then like more statement, yeah, I can be loved, or I am loved. And I know it sounds strange because it sounds exactly the opposite of what you believe, but these are just beliefs. You're practicing what it's like to have a belief that's more nuanced, that's different. So you're basically playing with these thoughts. So you go from one, and then you play with the thought, but you turn it around, you find exceptions, you kind of pick the belief apart. You do it when you're emotionally cool, not when you're in the heat of it, because in the heat of it, you can't help but sometimes get too attached to this belief. It's like, yeah, I can't come up with any way in which I'm good for something, right? But when you're emotionally cool, you will be able to. Does that make sense? So this is a very simple thing. So once you put all of these thoughts down and you're emotionally hot, then you can work with them. Just like you work with memories. So there's things to do with each of these. You turn around the thoughts, you do the pennebaker, you practice the crying child technique, and now we're going to come, what are we supposed to do with behaviors? Now notice you already know that we have some behaviors from trying to get distracted. So there's a bunch of usually dysfunctional behaviors, just or sometimes neutral, or sometimes time wasting, or harmful in one way or another, that is just from trying to cover up the pain and other emotions. And now we're going to come up with another set of behaviors that are behaviors that you usually, or we usually employ when we really try to get to something we badly want, but in a too much of a way. We overdo it, okay? So there is a need, and then you suddenly burst into behavior, like, I am going to get this finally, this is the manager saying, you better get down to it. And the manager is just like running the show for a while. So what happens? So a couple of things. So what I want us to understand about behavior is that when in this state, when this wheel is stuck, that the behavior is either paralysis, which is you don't do anything on the topic, and just avoid it, do comforting behaviors and so on, or you just overdo it. So it's almost like when so this is self, this is your manager, victim, firefighter. So the times when either manager's in charge, or when victim and firefighter are in charge. They're in different, so it's like paralysis or overdoing. And neither of them bring us close to our want in a very sustained way, right? It's a burst of activity, you stick to it, but then you get exhausted. So today we talk about how to manage the energy, basically. You can think of two currencies. There's energy, and then there's time. And we all are spending this currency, right? It just goes tick-tock, nothing stops, and the same thing with your energy, except that it doesn't quite work in a linear way. So I'll start with a more linear understanding of energy right here at the beginning. Oh yes, and here on the other side, this is how and once you are in, let's say when you finish the pennebaker exercise, you would feel calm or comforted, or so you can put those things on the other side. So you're working with this.
I don't understand this piece.
So the bliss or your ecstasy map is what happens on the other side of this wanting. So what you do is that as you're working through things, so as you're, let's say, having these thoughts, you try to turn them around. Remember the exercise, you're turning them around. You put what you have turned around on this side. It is never too late for me to try something. So you just write them down, right? And remember, these are the self-comforting behaviors from what we had before. We had distracting and we have so we put them here. And these are the emotions that we end up with as a consequence of having worked through some of these things. People tend to feel calm or free or loved or whatever the thing is for you. And it's okay even if you feel it for like a minute. The thing is that you're practicing having that feeling or fulfilled or whatever it is. Like you're practicing having that feeling again. Notice these are neural patterns, which means that the old ones are there as well. The self is trying to kind of fall into the old ones, but you're now practicing the new ones as well. You're rewiring and practicing new ones. Go ahead.
Which one do we start first? So new thought and then new behavior, new emotions, or?
No, you can start with new thoughts. Let's say at the end of the pennebaker, so you can do it however you want. Whatever way comes naturally. So let's say first, like up to this point, you were feeling things, and then you were having some thoughts.
Yeah.
And those of you who tried Pennebaker exercise, you went through this, and then you felt something at the end. You feel calm or you feel comforted. So at any point, when you're working with post-Pennebaker, you're going to probably try to fill this out.
Okay.
When you're working in this cool state on thoughts, you would fill this out. This you already kind of covered, remember? You said, I like to eat, or I like to smoke, but you know what, I can take a walk, I can take a bath, I can talk to a friend. So these ones you're already filling out.
And you have to do it for all three of these wants or just one?
This is not all yours. This board can be as big or as small as you want, so you don't have to do anything. From this point onward, you don't have to kind of, you're filling this out yourselves in a way that makes sense to you. You can actually even reorganize how everything is. Now you know what you're talking about. You just make it whatever you want it to be at this point. As long as slowly there's these 5 parts of self, and you're working with each of them, and there's how it is when we are stuck in the wheel, and then there's how it is when the wheel is going. So that those are the 2 sides of the board. And now we come to behavior, and there's a couple of things that I think are pretty obvious about a behavior, and there's a few that are not so obvious. And one thing that is not so obvious, that we tend to think of behavior as the self, and that's the part that we focus on the most, because when there's a change, we say, I want to be like this, I want to achieve this, or have my body like this, or I want my relationships to be like this, or I want to be in a relationship like this, I want to, have friends like there's this kind of, like you basically, when you imagine things, you see yourself behaving and looking a particular way in the situation, right? So that's where our imagination goes, and that's why when we try to change, we put in all energy and time into this. And when you look at this circle, I have reorganized now the circle to kind of better represent the natural flow of what happens. So originally the circles were in the order of how we were covering them. Right now, basically it goes something like, you have some pattern from the past, it creates some wants in you, and in both ones that are developmental, and there's ones that are comforting or misguided ones, and then they give you thoughts, which give you emotions, which give you behavior. Most of the time, behavior is from an emotion. So you can do behavior from thought, but that behavior is much harder. Very hard to go like, I think this is a good idea, and then you do it. Well, that's going to take a lot of self-regulatory energy. Yes?
Is that one of the flaws of cognitive behavioral therapy?
Yes.
Is that it focuses too much on thoughts instead of emotions?
What's interesting is that they're hoping that your change in your constructs brings about change in emotions, but it's like a tricky thing. It's like, because we can do things in our mind that become unconnected to our emotions. Like, yeah, from now on I believe X, but like, do I really believe X? Like deep in my heart, do I believe X? So that's the problem with the mind. It can trip, it's just fragmented, you kind of believe it, but not really. And so really, if you want to know what you believe, look at what you're feeling. Your feelings is going to tell you what you believe. However, what the mind is, it's basically the awareness is the only lever we have to change this, because emotions you're going to have, but you need the mind, it needs to intervene somehow. So that's what you intervene with the mind in all different parts, like we talked about. So notice that everything we're doing fundamentally is an intervention through the mind. Pennebaker exercise is an intervention through the mind. Even when you're doing your emotion stuff, it's you're going through the mental steps, like I calm down now, okay. Now I breathe, now I approach emotion. Notice they're all mental interventions, but we're trying to make them embodied so that they work.
I don't know if you can answer this question, but what comes first, the emotion or the thought?
Depends. So that's like a chicken or the egg problem.
Yes.
One way to think of it is, for example, you can try to change somebody's mind. So people who believe different things, like very radical opposition, like somebody who doesn't believe in evolution, just talking, or somebody who doesn't believe in climate change is talking to somebody who believes in climate change. And the question is, what evidence could one present to the other person to change their mind? And there is no evidence like that. Doesn't matter how many studies are published, doesn't matter, it's basically they're not going to change each other's minds. Why? Because they feel different things about the topic. Why? Because they have different values. And changing their mind is paramount to changing their, basically changing their whole world, view of the world, how they feel about everything. So this is what marketers understand. If you want to change what people think about something, change how they feel about it. So therefore make you feel good about certain things or certain products or certain brands, and then that feeling is going to bring up its own thoughts. But it's like a little cycle.
Maybe this was the whole point of the course, but I'm just realizing that you can feel things without having any thoughts.
That's
attached to
right.
them whatsoever.
That's right. Because, so think about this from evolutionary perspective. Feeling is there, like even in animals. Feeling is there to summon us up to do something in relation to threat or goal, right? It's there to have us act. And therefore we are very quick with it. Right? Thought, particularly conscious, not automatic thought, right? But the conscious kind of reflective thought comes later. In the moment, like you see a stick on the road, you think it's a snake, you jump away, you have a feeling, you're afraid, and they're like, oh no, it's a stick. I can come approach again.
This is where ultimately biases come from.
Yes.
Is that I harbor a feeling deep within me, a body feeling.
Yes.
And I haven't even processed
Mhm.
in my thoughts or intellectually.
So
don't
I
even
think,
know-
so let's say, you think, you see all these people say, oh, I'm not a racist. But basically their feeling is racist. But their mind is like, no, I'm not a racist.
Exactly.
So there's this kind of split inside of them, because fundamentally you can tell yourself, this is called self-deception. You tell yourself anything you want. That is the case. So you say, I think, I don't believe that, I believe this, I'm this kind of person, I'm gonna do this. You can basically say anything to yourself. So this is our little, and really the intervention that all that we have to intervene. We use the mind to intervene on all the other parts. Somebody could come to you with emotion intervention. For example, yesterday, when Armin gave a hug to Mo, that was emotional, right? That is, he did something, and it had an impact, and it did something for the other person, but there was no words exchanged. So it wasn't a mental intervention. There can be motivational interventions. So you witness somebody wanting something that you think it inspires or ignites someone. For example, I'm very excited about self-development. It might make you very excited about it too, and you're not sure quite why. It resonates with your own desire. It's almost like out of all the desires you have, this one got a little peaked, like it got interest, so it's like, oh yes, that's right, this is what I want to. So it can be, so it's like motivational contagion in a sense. And obviously emotional, or if you witness somebody who's very anxious, you might end up anxious, and so on. Go ahead.
I think you mentioned this in previous sessions, but just wanted to clarify. If we just want to change behavior, how come it doesn't impact effectively, like changing the mind or emotions from that side?
Why can't it? Because it's basically, we picked the weakest link. We picked the thing that comes at the very end, right? So some people, there were all these studies that says, no, behavior impacts everything. For example, they said, you have a studies where, I'm not gonna do it because, it's COVID time, but you put a pen in your mouth, so it looks like you're smiling, and that's supposed to, because you're smiling, it's gonna make you happy. So there were all these people after this research going around smiling, and did it make them happy? The idea was that if you have the behavioral stuff, the emotion will ignite. And maybe a little bit, not really. You can smile all you want, but if you're feeling unhappy or dissatisfied, if that's not genuine, if you're putting yourself into, then you're using self-regulation, which is excellent introduction to what we're going to talk about right now. So And self-regulation, right? Every time people wanted to use behavior, they said, look, willpower, you need to use willpower. And what willpower is putting your energy and time on behavior. And what happens is, so you have will, that's the only lever of change, and consciousness, right? So you can employ it wherever you want, but if you employ it, this is Roy Baumeister, and he did like hundreds of studies on self-regulation. He loves self-regulation, right? He's the gentleman I talked about who thought that if it weren't, so there's something slightly post-Freudian about it. He thinks that if it weren't for self-regulation, we would all be basically wild savages right now in this room. If it weren't, like, if everybody was not trying very, very hard to fight their violent and sexual instincts, it would be a chaos. Pardon me?
Me.
So he was doing this famous, now, recently there have been studies saying that some of his studies can be replicated. Again, there's a big food fight, but the point is, let's take from him what we can that makes sense to us, to kind of guide us, particularly when it comes to in terms of burnout, because that's what I want to discuss. It's like, how do you use this limited energy of being able to do something that you don't necessarily always want to do in order to grow more? So how do you do it? So he had a study in which he had undergrad students starve for like 12 hours and then bring them to a lab, and it would be, the lab was like filled with smell of chocolate cookies. And he brings them there and then says, okay, so you have been assigned to the radishes condition. So why don't you go ahead? So there was this pile of chocolate cookies and a pile of radishes. Says, you're assigned to radishes condition. So a person was supposed to eat the radishes and not touch the cookies, right? And then they were given this puzzle and said, okay, you've got to solve this, it's called an anagram. And but there was no solution to it, and what they were measuring was just how long people would persist in solving this. So the assumption was, this is not particularly fun to do if you can't find a solution. Do you give up right away? Do you just say, I don't have willpower anymore to do it? Or do you keep doing it? And what they found is that even when you control for the caloric intake and so on, people who have to prevent themselves from having the cookies spend less time on this puzzle. And what he said is, look, he says, you know, there's only so much this self-regulation, and if you spend it in trying not to eat the cookies, then you don't have enough left to be working on this puzzle. So he did a serious, and here's all the references for it. If you watch an emotional movie and they tell you, please don't make any facial expressions. So just, let's say if it's a sad, don't make sad face. So there you are, you're controlling your facial expression. Again, the same thing happens. You can't solve as well some anagram tasks. So the idea is you're doing something that you don't want to be doing, that's not natural to you to do, and that is preventing you from being able to do well something else that also requires self-regulation. Okay? In the third one, they said control your facial expressions. People who are controlling their facial expressions were physically less strong in this hand grip task. So you notice how now what you do in your mind is impacting what you do in your body. So if you're trying to do a lot of things in your mind that you do not want to be doing, or suppressing a lot of things, you're not going to be as strong physically. If you try to present yourself as somebody you're not, so they asked people who were introverts to present themselves to others as extroverts and vice versa. So it's like you walk into the room, and whatever your natural tendency either to talk or not to talk, they say do the other thing. So if you want to talk, you basically have to stay quiet, and if you want to stay quiet, you're asked to talk. These people as well had trouble in all sorts of self-regulation tests. They have trouble doing math, physical strength, controlling their facial expressions. So what is happening every time you do something that you don't want to be doing, that's not natural for you to do, or you're restraining yourself from doing something you want to do, like eating the chocolate cookies. So basically every time you use your willpower against something that comes naturally to you, that willpower gets somehow spent and can be used to do other things that also require willpower. Okay? And so he said, look, so this is, just notice that you need will only when you're doing something you don't want to do or you're preventing yourself from doing something you want to do. Which means that when you're doing what you want to do, you need to know willpower. I don't need any willpower to eat my Boston cream donut. None. You just go for it. Right? Notice that I will also overcome any obstacles to get to the donut if I need to. And I'll go to a different donut shop. You see what I mean? You're going to put in energy to do what you want. Versus doing something like this. So willpower only necessary when you're doing what you don't want to do. So he said something like, it kind of works like a muscle. It's basically expendable. It's expendable thing, and if you just keep using willpower, it gets stronger. If you don't use it, it gets weaker. That also kind of makes sense. It's basically also how much you train consciousness and choice, like that moment where you are, right? So that can be practiced. And the thing is though, we live in a culture in which people adore willpower. Because they think, okay, what if I had enormous, unlimited willpower, what would happen? And what would happen is, basically, you would be able to do things that you don't want to do all the time. And you can kind of imagine, you wake up when you don't want to wake up, you could. You could wake up 2 hours earlier. You could work at places you do not like to work, interact with people that you don't want to interact. You could compose your face in the right way. You could do the tasks that you hate to do. You could be in relationships with people you don't like and still have the right face. Oh yeah, honey, okay. Doesn't sound fun, does it? And unfortunately, people who have a lot of willpower often end up in lives which they don't like as much. Why? Because they can do it. And sometimes they do it because they think that this is achieving their goals. When you think about what usually leads us towards development, one thing that leads us towards development is that it breaks down. Basically, you try so hard, let's say that you're doing a job that you really dislike, and you're really trying, and at one point you're like, I can't do it. I can't put my face, I really don't like working with that person. I can't smile at them. I can't tell them, sure, yes, I'll do it. I'm not going to do this. And the same thing with relationships. At one point, it just all falls apart because you no longer can pretend, right? This is, could you do something other than comes to you naturally? And at some point, if you have a lot of willpower, you can pretend a lot. And if you don't have enough willpower, you can't pretend much. So the key is, it's not yes or no to will, because obviously we need will. It's like how to employ it. And what I believe is that the best way to employ willpower is not to try to maintain the set of activity that you do not want or like, but on the self-development. So this is the difference with discipline versus self-regulation. So in discipline, let's say somebody says, okay, I want to be fit. And what does that mean to people? Okay, I need to be up at 6 a.m. and I need to go to my spinning class, right? And does anybody here like spinning? There's a spinning lover, so forgive me. But once I tried it, and like the idea of somebody at 6 a.m. screaming at you very loudly with this very loud music, it was like my own version of hell. So for example, I could think, okay, that's what fitness is. I do this thing where people go, for example, running in the morning. And have you watched faces of people who run? There's few people who actually enjoy it. And then the vast majority of people who look terribly miserable. I live in the annex, and then I sit on the little deck. It's like on the second floor, so they can't see me. And then I watch people who are running. I look at their faces, just to see, like, does this person look like they're enjoying? Like, is this what they want to be doing? And very frequently it's a no. Okay, and sometimes it's, yeah, you can just see the person is really wanting to do it. And of course I could not be judging the face, right? But in any case, a lot of us think that doing anything looks a particular way, but it doesn't have to look that way. It can look many different ways. It can look I don't even know what they're doing here. It's not tennis, but
That'll work.
Netball?
I can play.
The point is they're looking like they're having fun. And they want to do it, which means that they're gonna get out there. And it, it reminds me of like how people think of exercise. So some people almost need self-reward to exercise. They are like, okay, if I exercise, then I'm going to, give myself a donut after, or something like this. Other people are going to pay things to other people energetically. So, for example, this is like, I've witnessed this, a husband telling a wife, okay, it's like, honey, like, I really want to go, this is a couple who has a young child. It's like, honey, I really want to go play hockey. This is pre-COVID. I'm going to take care of baby tonight. I'm going to do the dishes. I'm going to vacuuming. I'll take out all the garbage. I really want to go. But what is he offering? He's offering a lot of energy and a lot of work to do what? What other people usually consider something aversive, which is exercise. But it is fun for him. He enjoys it. So he's willing to do additional work so he can spend energy here. So instead of thinking of energy in terms of, anything physical activity spends it, you have to think there's some physical activities that give you back the energy. So this is why it's not linear. So you could be doing things, if you're doing things that are intrinsically motivating, it's going to give you back the energy. So this is when you do things that you love. By the way, this is the reason why, be it athletes or other people, entrepreneurs, those who do the things that they love often outperform others, and the reason for it is because they have more energy. The activity is giving them the energy, and they are not drained as much. Go ahead.
I think I have an example, not me, my close friend, who paid a couple of $1,000s for a personal training program to be fit. So basically self-regulating, like paying in advance, making sure, okay, I'm gonna go and then do it.
External.
And there were two people, like, they both started together. So one was doing that and another one. The result, I think it was exactly the same. Another person, like, I just saw them like yesterday for lunch. One was still fit, even if after the program he continued by himself, like, didn't even, like, he continued his own motivation, exercises. The other went back to old him. He wasted, a couple $1,000 for personal trainings. He's back at his old, pretty not good or not fit.
Not fit. So this is the key. I think what we have been told, books and blogs, is make a public commitment so that other people will take you to account. Basically, other people will shame you into, right? And then if you don't, like, basically you'll feel so shamed and embarrassed that you're gonna do it. So I tell people, whenever and also I've noticed sometimes some parents have that as it's like they say mean things to their children trying to motivate them. But what I tell them, every time you increase the negative emotion account of somebody, it will not lead to, it leads to more comforting behavior. That means potentially more addictions, more of these negative behaviors. It doesn't lead to, or it leads to their manager getting stronger and saying, okay, I gotta do this, right? So it's very counterproductive to be making these public goal targets, right, to others, and changing for them instead of for you.
But for same situation, one took it as, enjoying it,
Sure.
liking it. Another one forced himself to be just, okay, I need to do this because I'm not fit. And self, that was more strong manager. But I think after the program, basically firefighter
Yeah, it goes
said,
back.
yeah, I said, don't worry.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's why we have up and down in the self instead of development, right? Because it's not the inner self that's wanting it. It's something else in you that wants the change because it looks better, because other people will approve. Remember, those are these layers of wants. So, one thing that you can do right away for yourself, no matter, so you could be in your own so now I'm going to give you a set of advice, because most people are already trying to change something. They've been trying to change a behavior, and I always tell them, fine. Can you move this to a self-discipline rather than self-regulation task? So let's say somebody is trying to eat well, by now they have to eat salads instead of what they like, sweets, And I always ask them, is there anything that's healthy that you like to eat, that you actually enjoy, it doesn't take you energy? So for example, maybe a person likes, if they like sweets, they like fruit. Okay, so have a lot of that. So you're not gonna have kale all the time, but you might have fruit all the time, and that's still better than what you had before. You see that? It's like you're moving it from the self-regulation to self-discipline. And that still takes some self-discipline. You have to think ahead, you have to prepare it, you have to buy it. But it's a very different ball game. It doesn't drain you. Every time you sit, so think about what happens when people are on diets. You're basically continually expending self-regulation. Don't eat this, don't eat this. When we have a lot of issues from the past, don't think this, don't think these other things, don't eat this, don't do that. Like there's just so much that we're spending, that's why we're so drained, because so much is happening internally that there's no energy left to get off the couch. And that makes sense. So there's some things that we all know is going to restore the energy, and that is sleep, food. By the way, meditation increases parts of your, strengthens the parts of the brain in charge of self-regulation. So after 2 months, you'll actually, with meditation, you'll see better improved self-regulation. Mo, when you went and sit down on a bench, there is the bench. There's something about looking at nature that is very restorative to people, and people, they don't know why. It's very interesting. I was looking at why we're looking, and this is the case, they've done studies even when you're looking at nature at your computer screen. So what is it? And I was thinking how everything that humans build, like look at this bench and look at the nature. Everything that we build has lines. Do you notice that it has lines? And everything that nature is, notice here there's no lines. So I wonder maybe that's what it is. There's no straight lines anywhere in nature. And maybe our perceptual system, it relaxes it or something.
There's a chemical that the forest gives off when you walk through it.
There's also forest baths people take, but that doesn't explain how you can be inside of your office and looking at the screen.
Because it triggers that feeling.
It triggers the feeling. Any intrinsic activity is going to give you back energy, laughing, being positive. So that's why they say it's like, if there's something, not pretending you're happy, but actually seeing something funny and laughing about it. And even thinking about somebody else who is restoring. Let's say, a friend has gone for a wonderful camping trip, and you're like, oh, and if the friend is similar to you, you'll be like, oh, that's right. It will bring you back energy. By the way, you can get drained in the same way. If somebody close to you is drained, you're going to get drained the same way. Now, there was a study by Carol Dweck basically saying, look, there is no really objective level of willpower that you have. It's like how much you believe that you have. So what you believe in your mind about your own will ends up having a huge effect. So don't think of your willpower as linear. There's ups and downs, and it's not identical to physical energy, because oddly enough, you can expend physical energy but get more energy in return. What I need you to understand is that if you keep doing things that you don't want to be doing, what will happen to your body is that it experiences it as a stress. It's like remember when I said it's like a bear that you have chained next to you. So the stress that is all the time, but what it does, it wears out parts of your physiological system that are in charge with producing hormones that will restore you. So let's say that you go to bed here and you wake up and the sleep restores you back up here, okay? So most of the time sleep is supposed to restore it. Now, new parents or people who have been working hard for the last 20 years, they say, what do you mean it's supposed to, like I wake up and I'm tired and I go to work. But originally, the way the sleep was supposed to work is that you go to bed, you wake up and you're rested. That's for a lot of people, it's a really foreign concept, being rested. So if you notice that you're not getting rested, what's happening is that your body is getting cues. Basically, it no longer can create the things, usually cortisol, that keeps you up during the day. So you get tired in the morning, you can't get up. Basically what happens in a burnout is that the slope of recovery gets low. Why? Because the body can no longer produce what it needs to get you up in the morning, to get you through the day. Classic examples of burnout. You wake up tired. You feel like you could sleep all the time if you're just given the opportunity. If you go for a vacation, within 2 days of being back from a vacation, you feel as stressed and tired as before vacation. Foggy mind. I think I talked about this. Accumulating weight in this part of the body versus anywhere else. All of these are symptoms that your body is struggling to process stress. You have put it under so much stress for so long, it's getting close to the burnout. What is burnout? Basically, these hormones stop getting produced. What does that look like? You can't get out of bed. Like, you know how you're tired in the morning? Well, you're not tired, it's just that your body doesn't listen to you. You can't make yourself. So when people are in mild burnout, it might take them up to 6 months of a very changed lifestyle in order to revert it. Why? Because you have been eroding your adrenal axis, or this axis that deals with stress. And so it doesn't take, you can't just like take 2 weeks off and get better. It takes a long time. It involves not just learning to sleep as much as you want, you can't even do exercise anymore because the body interprets active aerobic exercise as stress at this point. So all you can do is like gentle, slow things. What else? You can, and you need to change what's happening, because a lot of stress is what happens in your mind. People need to restructure what's happening in their mind, because otherwise they can't get out of burnout. When it's severe, people have to quit their jobs and careers and take a couple of years to recover. You've seen here and there people just falling off the map. It's either that or some sort of autoimmune disease that's caused again by stress over long periods of time. Any questions about burnout? Yes?
I feel like there's like a slight glamorization of burnout. Like, are we just over categorizing people who are really tired, or are people actually experiencing burnout?
I mean, it's a very physiological state. So the question is, so you're very tired, but even when you're tired, if I put you to, if somebody sleeps and gets proper within a week, you should feel better. But if you don't feel better, it means that your capacity to recover is getting impaired. This slope is getting, and there's a point at which so you have to understand that these hormones that are getting produced by these glands, they control your energy levels throughout the day. So basically, we're supposed to have highest cortisol in the morning. That's what should wake us up, cortisol in the morning. Then it goes down, down, down. There's a little peak up, and then goes down, down, down. Somebody who's in a burnout, the body can't produce it. So what it happens is it ends up low in the morning, so you're very, very tired in the morning. And slowly during the day, it gets higher, so that basically somebody who's in a burnout will feel most energetic in the evening. Often, because they're trying to do most of their work then, they stay up late, but then it just sort of continues the cycle. They don't get enough sleep, da, da, da. So, what does it mean very, very tired? Very, very tired is the kind of tired that you can get rested from. Basically, burnout is when your body can't experience recovery from rest. And it sort of manifests physically, mentally, psychologically. A lot of time it's misdiagnosed as depression. It would make you depressed because you suddenly can't do all sorts of things you were able to do before. Sometimes just before burnout, people start doing more and more, and the reason for it, it's almost like, imagine you have these glands and they need to get going. So it's almost like you're squeezing them harder and harder. So you introduce more and more active. So you say, okay, I'm going to run in the morning because I need to get myself going. So you just keep introducing things, and that just kind of makes the burnout faster and faster.
What stimulates the adrenal system by way of food or other things other than that?
Obvious things. So for example, somebody who's in a burnout has to get off all stimulants, because caffeine, Anything that stimulates, the body basically just needs to, it needs to experience no stress, no increased heartbeat for any reason. Just like everything just needs to go down, calm down, so that the body recovers. That's why even exercise, it's considered your body would interpret. So for example, if you're in a burnout, if you exercise like active aerobic, you will want to sleep right after. Basically, it just squeezes these like glands so much that person practically just passes out. Like they sleep for 2 hours after. So you notice these things, right, in people around you. Oddly enough, it has a look. Sometimes you can just look at somebody and you're like, oh yeah, that's close to the burnout. The skin tone changes color. Why? The hormones are very different. Different things start happening. Any other questions? So the key is, don't get there. If you're on the way, stop. More sleep, more nutritious food, less stress, meditation. Take it seriously, because if you get to the burnout, like you might have to change your career. Go ahead.
On the restorers, what was the thing about someone else and rethink again?
Okay, so let's say, so basically even thinking about somebody who is close to you, so this is vicarious restoration. You think, let's say you know that somebody is enjoying a weekend off and it's somebody who you think is similar to you. Just by thinking it, it can, remember it's all up here. Even thinking about it can kind of give us a little bit of restoration.
So that's both,
Vicarious restoration.
so both of those are.
Yes.
So what's vicarious?
Vicarious is like experiencing it through somebody else. Yes?
So I have a friend who's a resident doctor, and she is like working a ton of hours, and she's always complaining, I'm so burned out, I'm on call again, 4 days in a row, 10 hours sleep over 3 days, so something like that, right? But like, if she's not doing anything different about it, right? Like if it was, she would still go for it. It's not like she would ever say something to take a break. So she would
Can I,
just,
because we have a medical system that, I mean, I think it should be illegal. That should be illegal, right? What they're doing to the medical residents. I know people are so burnt out they had to take, in the middle of their residency, 2 years off. Because basically of the sleep pattern completely ruined, like everything, just basically the body breaks down. I was teaching in, there's Gemba, but for health administrators. And somebody brought up this topic. And I tried to explain to there was maybe half doctors, half other administrators. I tried to explain to them, I said, listen, there's a reason why probably 50% of people now consult naturopaths in nutrition and they don't go to the doctor anymore. And the reason why being a doctor has lost so much credibility is because we can see you and you're not well. You're not well. You put yourself and other people around you through things that are meant to be harmful. And if you're willing to do that to yourself and people around you, why on earth would I come to you for anything to do with maintaining my wellness? They have to know it. And it was interesting, it's almost like there's two camps. Older camp, so there was a gentleman who was much older who was a head of a hospital. He's like, well, these young people, they're so entitled, they want to sleep, every night, and that's not. And then there's a younger, it's like, okay, we need to change, but you see, it's like a generational thing. It's like, I suffer, you get to suffer.
But like even with COVID, so like I also have a friend who's like a merge dog. I didn't tell him this, but before COVID we met up and he was really like skinny. I could see like there's circles under his eyes.
Yeah, it looks dark.
But then we met up recently, he looks so much healthier and like well rested. He's like, yeah, like people are just not going to the emergency room as often because everyone's scared of COVID. They also get like all these, like more measures in place. They're not seeing as much people, but he looks so much better now than before.
And that kind of torture of doctors that happens, I think should be illegal. it just should be legal, that we shouldn't allow, let alone just how bizarre and weird it is to do that to somebody who's supposed to take it. Because, like, if you think that that's okay to happen to you, like, you look at the human, like, you just, or even about having a choice to say no. It's like, no, I'm not gonna do it. Or, did you see what I mean? There's just so many things in that system that are not optimal to bring us people who are supposed to help us heal.
See, you missed something here.
Yes, tell me.
And I'm not saying it's right, but if I take it into my own world, I'm exceedingly demanding profession. And if someone asked me to do something when I was a young person, it was 24 hours, it was 24 hours, I didn't care less. I did it, and I loved the fact I could. I loved that feeling.
Would you have gotten fired if you didn't?
It wasn't a firing offense, I just would have been ignored. So it just, you go off into the detritus of doing small things as opposed to riding to the vet. So the intensity that I put people through though, it's a bit of let me tell you one thing, it was over the gate. So I had a young lady who came to me, who's now a very prominent lawyer in town. And we got retained on a case which was for an injunction already given, so we were trying to do the mess. So I told her, I said, go ahead and do this, get rid of the injunction. Just bring me the materials. 25 days later, I called her, I said, where are the materials? I've written 20 every day, she said, I've written to the other side, and they basically ignored her. I said, you've got 2 days to get that stuff on my desk, and don't come talk to me. She ran around and talked to every single lawyer in the law firm. 2 days later it came, I changed one word, by Friday, it was gone. She didn't know how to jump over the gate. And she needed to do it alone. She couldn't possibly, if she had any more help from me, she needed to have that sense of fear of risk and just do it. And so that intensity teaches people how to become independent, powerful, face enormous pressures to get something done. You got no choice. So to coddle somebody along and say, oh, you're retired, they go home now, I don't think so.
Okay, I have nothing against intensity. Maybe most of you have stayed up doing something you love at some point in your life. You know what it feels like to be so focused and so intense and so badly wanting to do it.
Right.
Another thing is to have it systematically baked into the system so that you can't succeed in a system unless it breaks you down. That's two different things. So I have nothing against an intense voluntary dysregulation of like growing and learning and putting yourself into experiences, yes. But we need to think systemically. Have we made a system that makes sleeplessness, right? Do I want to be treated by somebody who hasn't slept for 48 hours? We need to think about that, right?
Does it matter if you're doing it in the Army versus the medical corps?
Well, don't get me on the topic of the Army. So because so it seems like in organizations there's something very similar happening to those cults that we've mentioned, right? Like if it is break you down to build you up so that you do not question me, you do what you're told, I obviously have issues with that. If it's like break you down, build you up. Versus I give you all the opportunities and then you jump over as many obstacles as you can with as much intensity that you want, and sure, you might achieve more if you are more passionate and more, but not to make it so that nobody who wants to maintain that, basically we have made it so that I think just in Ontario still, that nobody who wants to maintain their health can end up as a doctor. Nobody who takes their body seriously, their body's health, can actually make it into a doctor. So what is happening? Something weird is happening.
Have you experienced burnout? Overdoing something you are
Yes.
intrinsically motivated by?
Yes. It's almost like it starts, you love it, you start, and then at some point the manager comes on and says, look how much you love it. Just keep going. Look how much you love it. I mean, really, like just keep going, keep going. You can. It happens all the time.
Two questions. The first one is John. If, for example, if you really like it, and it's a system-wise competition, or society-wise, you need to work really hard and then get the top, totally understand. Then, for your character, like for your experience or other successful lawyers or in the field, have you seen them real successful guys without any burnout? Or at some point, even yourself or your successful friends, others, have you seen them failing at least temporarily because of burnout?
So, the law firm that I was in for 45 years was created in 1860. And it had a string of the top barristers in the country in it. I joined in 72, became a partner in 79, and in 1981, the senior man, Walter Williston, died. He died at just shy of his 60th birthday. There was no lawyer, barrister, who stayed active through their career, who made it past the age of 60 in 1981.
From heart attack or from some illness?
Never made it. Now, some went to the bench, they did other things, but as an active barrister, I'm one of the few to make it past 60.
And what's the secret?
Willpower so far, but soon it's going to be deregulation.
Yeah, the passionate dysregulation, I like this.
And second question to you then
Yes.
is, if we cannot change other people because from
Yes.
obviously we can learn, and if you see someone who's suffering from burnout,
Yes,
what can we do?
you notice, you have conversation, you say, I noticed that you seem tired, or tell me about it. And then maybe they'll ask you for advice,
But
you
if they
can tell.
don't, then it's, in theory, it will be very difficult to change, even if you change, if they don't change.
It's difficult for you to change you, let alone
Yeah.
to change them.
So, like, but if you're close friends or family.
Yeah, you
suffering,
love them, you
yeah.
offer them, you talk to them, you try to offer some of your constructs. You say, I understand this, it's very important, but you're important too.
No, it's another thing. You've got to go to that conversation with training. You cannot go to someone who's having burnout issues or all the other factors like addiction. You can't go and talk to them directly, it won't work. You've got to have an intelligent perspective. But what I'm telling you now,
Mm-hmm.
you kids, all of you, is that you've got a life cycle.
You
And
got
you're
a
gonna
what?
face it come hell or high water in some form.
Uh-huh.
And just have an intelligent view of the life cycle. That's how you help your friends, by telling them about life cycle.
Mhm.
And then if you really have to intervene, then go with really almost a medical level ability to change them. If you go direct at it, you just lose a friend.
Mhm. Go ahead, Courtney.
Am I to understand that you sort of made an analogy that the medical field is a bit of a cult?
That the way that they train of breaking down these young people and building them up looks like it. But what do I mean by cultish? I mean that they train them to be easily controlled.
So sleep deprivation, things that you
Yeah.
torture someone with.
Yeah.
Is
So
what-
that they don't, when I say you jump, you jump.
Now, I'm just curious if that another cultish aspect to it, and I'm using the word very loosely, but.
Yeah.
Is it that they identify and their whole identity is so wrapped up in being a doctor? I am a doctor, and I am going to suffer for this identity and complete it?
There is that. I mean, sometimes it's just practical things. It's like you've trained for so many years. Now you're at the verge of making some money. You probably have $250,000 of debt from medical school. Like you're right close, and somebody holds your income, your future ability to practice in their hand and says, no, unless you submit, no.
Forgive me, John, but being a lawyer, and the crazy hours that you have to complete when you're, what is it, articling?
Yeah,
It
or
never
article-
changes, but yeah, sure.
Again, forgive me, John, but I liken being a lawyer to that sort of cultish aspect.
Anything that will try to break you down to build you up, just for the control. So anything that will make you easily controllable fundamentally is cultish, because
For me, I see that it's also tied really closely to your identity. Like if
Yes.
you asked a doctor, what would you do? And
what would you do if you were not a
if you were
doctor?
What would you do, John, if you weren't a lawyer and you couldn't identify as a lawyer?
John would be a poet.
John would be a poet. But you know, they suffer so much,
Mhm.
it's so counterintuitive to the field they're
Yeah,
practicing in.
unfortunately, yeah, the identity sticks so much that they're more easily controlled because all it requires is somebody saying, oh, what happens if you know, if I take away this, like, even a thread that they could take away identity becomes incredibly devastating.
And the prestige.
Prestige.
The prestige attached to it. I was watching a TV show, just on a tangent, I was watching a TV show yesterday, where in England, a surgeon is addressed not as doctor, but as Mr. And again, it's counterintuitive, but in England they do some weird things. But the prestige attached to differentiating yourself from an average GP, and I'm a surgeon, and they'll correct people that address them as Dr. So-and-so. No, I'm Mr. because I'm a surgeon.
Oh, is a Mr. higher than the doctor?
Mr. is, you know, a surgeon is considered more sophisticated, so male surgeons in England will insist on being addressed as Mr. instead of doctor. So it's just this prestige and this identity, and
Mhm.
and you know, I agree with you as far as it should be illegal. How can you be promoting health and wellness when essentially you're doing what we do to people in Abu Ghraib? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's
It's,
mind-boggling.
yeah.
And why do people willingly?
You know what, everybody complains about millennials. Oh, millennials are so entitled. Millennials, all this. But millennials are going to come up to you and say, you know what? I'm going to sleep tonight. Yeah, and if you want to fire me, I'm going to sue you because I have human rights. They're going to come up with things, and you know, everybody's like, please, millennials. But you know what? There's some sort of culture. Even if it comes from the entitled side, it might provide a little bit of balance. Because obviously, you know, we're not having it a healthy way, so if it's the entitlement, well, let's just, as long as something changes the system. Already, I think in many provinces, these kinds of things are illegal, that are legal in Ontario. They're illegal now in other provinces. There was a committee, there's a huge focus on the wellness and mental well-being of, so suicide rates among physicians are enormous. Burnout, illness, like, they're dropping down like flies. So in other there's now, people are thinking about it at least, they're starting something. Ontario is still holding out to be able to do whatever they want. So it's a bastion of, you know, indoctrination. Mo, you had the hand up.
Yes, I had a question on something you touched on earlier, the facial expression or the body expression.
Yes.
I'm gonna state my case because I'm trying like to relate. So I have a transparent
You're transparent.
face.
Yeah.
So if somebody says a comment, unintentionally my face will change,
Yeah.
even though I'm not reacting on it.
Yeah.
And people read me for that.
Okay.
And sometimes I feel like I'm being treated in a certain way or put in a certain category or a box.
Because of that.
Because of that.
Mhm.
And sometimes I tell them like, I'm processing stuff. Like you need to allow me some time to process. Like maybe I show like anger or something.
Okay.
And it leads me sometimes to burn out because I'm doing a lot of
Control it.
controlling on it.
Okay.
Because
so,
if
yeah.
it were me acting naturally,
Yeah.
I would probably like my face would go like a clown or like very angry like in a second. And I've been called even names on it sometimes. Like people sometimes call me bipolar because I could be smiling and laughing and suddenly like I'm like angry or I'm
Okay.
angry and then I'm like in a different state like within a flick of a second. And I tell them no, I'm just like this is
Processing.
my way of processing stuff.
So, okay, so notice this. Of course, it's very draining to keep controlling the face. So, like, in your case, for example, I'm very, very transparent as well. But I wouldn't work on trying to control the face. I would work on why am I so easily triggered? Usually it's the old stuff. Old stuff, somebody presses a button, so I would work on the buttons. That way, you move the energy and you work on the things that have permanent gains. So somebody makes some comment, let's say that's condescending. If I have old issues about being condescended to, my face would flare up and I would get sensitive. If I put the energy and work on the issue, as they're doing it, I'm like, oh yeah, I noticed this, but it's okay, I'm good. Right? So that you don't have to work on the face, you work on the issue. So that's the key with this. The key is work on the deep issues. Use your will, use your self-regulation to work on the deep issue and not to cover up the surface, like the behaviors. Not to deal with the behaviors, deal with the underlying emotion, body memory, want, like even constructs in your mind. Work on the other parts of the circle. It's a better investment of willpower. So that's key. Any other part of the self is a better investment. Even sometimes, you have a task that you can't see, like you don't want to do it. It's like people feel this about cleaning. They're like, I don't want to clean, I'm just going to write. Can you construct? Can you want it? Is there a way, like you can even work on the want. I have, and sometimes the mind helps. I have this construct when I clean my place. It's like the whole universe is going into entropy, right? Everything is falling slowly apart. Yes?
Yeah.
But when you clean, it's like moving the universe back. So to me, I have this construct and it makes me very excited to clean the house because there was chaos and then suddenly there's order. And human beings are the only species that are able to make order out of chaos versus chaos continually descending into order. So it's almost like my mind, I have there's something I didn't want because it didn't make any sense, like it was just troublesome or energy. And then you see it in a different way and it makes it something you want. Because I feel like it gives me this thing, right? So if you work on any part of the circle other than just behavior, it will be time better spent. Anything.
Thank you.
So here's another thing that I suggest. Create, in addition to that list of things that restore everybody, there's things that restore uniquely you, and you will know what this is. For somebody it's listening to music, for somebody it's, whatever the thing is for you, talking to a friend, watching an interesting show, taking a bath, journaling, like whatever this is for you, write down, make a little, the slide, I had it all the pictures, put it somewhere close to where you are, and then when you have a more regular schedule and there's draining parts of your day, try to insert these. Insert them before, right? Like you just put in and why do you want a whole set of things? So that you have various things that last different. So for example, a bath takes like 2 hours, but listening to a piece of music you like takes 2 minutes. So in between meetings, just before you're about to talk to somebody who really, really drains you, you listen to a piece of music before and after. You're picking yourself up. You're trying to maintain your will to live, basically. And obviously, try to notice what are the big drainers. Sometimes it's situations, sometimes it's people, and you know who these people are. They're the people who, when you talk to them, you feel like you've lost 2 liters of blood after. You just feel like, oh my God, okay? So there's either people or situations or activities, or even thinking about something will make you drained. So figure out what these are to try it. It's like, it's almost like it's like a cup. So there's things that make the cup leak. You want to fill those holes that you don't want to leak. And then there's things that make you pour. So you want to get as much this energy to live maintained throughout your day. So that by the end of the day, you're not drained. You're just sort of happy to be resting and going to sleep.
Is the whole world in pathology, say those who have been in your class?
All of us, in pathology.
Suffering all these things.
You know what, we continue suffering even after the class. It's just that we can work on them in a way that is faster and we can understand it a little bit better. So the thing is that another thing is the norm is no inner change. The norm is situational change. Something will change with your situation that will kind of prompt some changes, inner change. They'll try to prompt. And then nothing will happen. And that it's almost like with relationships. You're going to be in a relationship, and let's say you have an inner pattern that is dysfunctional in relationships. So then what's going to happen? Either things are going to get worse, in which case you might end up losing a relationship and so on. What will happen after? There'll be another relationship, and the same dysfunction is coming up. So the beautiful thing about dysfunction is it is our opportunity to work on it, and it's always there. So whatever it is that wherever we get, we have the opportunity. So whatever situation we're in the moment, we have in front of us everything we need. You see the pattern, you try to work your way out of the pattern. And there's no perfection. So we just keep doing this, we just keep going. No rest. No rest for the wicked. That's yes. Okay, so what we're talking with will is slow change. So when it's like you're digging that thing with a shovel, and so if you're gonna do it, you pick one thing at a time. So what I suggest, so here's what I suggest in terms of the final technique. This is the stop and start technique. Try to figure out what are the things that when you're desperate for something, you do. Okay? What do you enter into in this desperate manner? And stop it. And this is the most difficult thing for people, is to stop doing things that they have decided in this self-regulation willpower way will get them there. And I want you to pick just one or two things that so I want you to put yourself, what should you be doing? You pick the simplest thing. Let's say you're trying to have a fit body. So let's say we go with that, it's very simple. So I'm sure up to this point we have tried these exercises and this diet and that diet and this kind of aerobics class and that kind of class. Okay, you've tried everything. Just stop all of it. Just like relax, stop all of it. Maybe you're on this diet or that diet and a million diets. Just stop it. Just stop everything and think, if I were already fit, you imagine, if I were already fit, what would be the thing I'd enjoy to do? Just imagine, so what would I eat? What would I enjoy eating if I were already fit? So it has to be something that doesn't require willpower. Pick one or two things. Huh? Right? So you pick, this is what I meant by moving from willpower to discipline. You would enjoy eating fruit, great. That doesn't require a lot of will. Why? Because you like it. You would enjoy walking with your friends. You would enjoy, playing basketball with your friend. You would enjoy something, right? That. Pick that thing that you would enjoy and keep it. You keep those behaviors, and you basically just, instead of trying to do the right thing, you try not to do the distraction behaviors. Because most of the things that are dysfunctional are actually distraction from pain. So for example, if you eat to comfort yourself, you practice those behaviors that we already talked about here, right? So here's you put down your overdoing behaviors. Too strict diets, working too much, too many social connections, right? The overdoing. You want friends, you befriend everybody. And then it's hard to maintain friends because now you have 300 friends. And instead, you pick one or two behaviors in that domain that give you joy. And you put the rest of your willpower on the inner change. Because when you do that, so pick one or two things that come naturally to you, they don't drain you. And those are the things you stick. So I'm not saying that if you want a relationship, stop dating. It's that get yourself off, 5 dating websites, stay with one. Or get yourself off having to have a very, very strict, and just like pick a couple of things that you're going to, eat, or a couple of whatever it is that you'd like to move. Or if it's work-wise, one direction, you'll reach out to 3 people on LinkedIn a week instead of to 20. You see, you need to stop overdoing because it doesn't lead to continue. So you need to just take that energy, keep it, and use it for that inner change, because less pain, less distracting behaviors.
So if you're driving towards ambition, come hell or high water kind of ambition.
Come hell and high water is no matter what happens to me, in which case you let the manager take over. And then you watch the consequences come.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to ask a similar question is, I think practicing this will help me to fulfill and have a really good balanced personal life once I remove those bags and then have a more
Yes.
happy person and like more present. But I think
It would kill your ambition.
no, not kill, but I think that's separate part or separate issue where at work, because of social system, you have to, stand out in order to, become successful,
Okay.
right? Going
So,
up the rank.
one
or
thing,
other-
so remember my cleaning example. Okay, so there you're in an environment, it might be a little bit not the healthiest environment.
Yeah.
Is there anything you actually, how you would like, not how you're gonna adjust yourself, is there anything you would like, how you would like to stand out? Something you enjoy. Like you basically try to limit pleasing everybody and try to pick parts of what you enjoy doing and try to get yourself.
But that's also someone who is very ambitious and very competitive. They still practice this and be a really positive or fulfilled person. But if that same person has a good high ambition, will probably do a lot of self-discipline and do a lot of work.
Yeah.
Whereas if they have lower ambition, then
The self does work. This thing wants to develop and produce and create in the world. And so this is the self that is going to achieve a lot of things.
So you're saying if self is having a great ambition and doing self
Yeah, of
discipline,
course.
it's good. But
All
if
of
it's,
your, yes. all
but if
of
it's a
your-
manager doing it, that's
Yeah,
the problem.
because this is fear. I need to be successful, otherwise they're gonna think that I'm not no good, or my family is not gonna want me anymore, or I'm not gonna be making enough money, I'm gonna be on the street, or da da da. That's the manager talking. Self says, I have this vision of what I think I can achieve, and here I come.
So it's good. It's a healthy ambition. When
Yes.
it's coming from self.
Yes.
And that's, I guess, the characteristics of a really successful leaders in the industry where they practice strong self-discipline and.
I have no idea, there's all different kinds of successful leaders in the
Sure,
industry.
yes. But if they're, let's say, promoting self-discipline, you have to wake up early, doing something.
But that's not self-discipline, that's self-regulation. Again, you have to understand, self-discipline is something that you want to be doing, not something you're forcing yourself to do.
Okay. So if they enjoy doing that because they wanted to be successful,
Yes,
that's coming from self.
that's self. It's like, I want to be up at 5 because there's business, people who open up their business, they love it. They're like, I am up at 5 and I'm doing this and that, I love it. But then they start forcing others, why don't you get up at 5? And the other person's like, I want to sleep until 7, I'm not so passionate about your project. Go ahead, Perez, and then Shweta.
Yeah, but isn't it that you do struggle in the beginning, but it becomes your habit, you will get a 5 anyway, you enjoy, or that becomes history actually after.
The problem is that anything can become a habit, something that's good or bad for you.
Yeah.
So the question is, you need to be able to test it against this. Is it something that's really developmental for you? In which case, it's a wonderful thing to maintain as a habit. It's like eating a healthy food. Like eating food, it's like, it's both you enjoy and it's giving you nutrition and it's like great. But you could also have a habit to stay up working until 2 a.m. every night. And that's also a habit. And you decide, I need to do it because of this, this, and that.
So in the beginning, if you require manager to build up a good habit, and then
No,
that's.
manager doesn't know what is
Self.
Manager will just build up whatever it thinks will prevent trouble and give it success. This one just wants to be seen as good enough, successful, don't judge me, I made the money, you're gonna love me because I work hard for your love. That's this one.
So we have to, I guess, time with, in summary, I guess, key takeaways, if we develop strong self who can be motivated, then it will make a good
You would know when the fear is starting to creep into what you think is a good habit. Like, I'm doing this because so monitor fear. Fear is a good sign that this is not self anymore. Talking, it's now these things that they're the pain, that it's like there's something interfered. Like, if you don't feel fear, and you can do things that are potentially difficult, but you don't feel fear, you feel excited, that's how you know it's self. It's creating, it's acting, it wants things. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to add to Victor's point. It's like, because I interview people who started businesses, there's a group of people who just did a business because they wanted to be an entrepreneur. And they're very typical of like the hustle culture. They'll spew a lot of facts about how successful they are. there's a bunch of other founders, they would never say that they are like hustling or they're entrepreneurs. When I ask them like, why are you doing this? They're more like, I saw a problem, I wanted to fix it. And then I'm like, did you ever envision opening like 13 restaurants or 2 retails or all of this? They're like, no. They're like, I just wanted to fix this one thing and I just kept going. So there's more things I'm fixing.
Thank you for bringing that up. You know why? Because purpose, sense of purpose is always in your immediate environment. It's basically when you get sense of purpose when you meet your developmental potential in the moment. It is never your imagination of what you're gonna, like your vision, that little scenario fantasy, that's not purpose. That's your fantasy. Purpose is always right in front of you. Purpose is that problem and your solution, and then from there something else opens up, and that's why purpose in a sense doesn't require long-term planning, because you can't long-term plan a purpose. It requires you to take most and develop most out of what's really the relationship that you have, even though you don't think you have a relationship, you do. The work, or you might not, I don't have the right kind of work. You have enough about work to practice that inside of, right? You have everything you need to meet that purpose in here, and then that builds. If you keep doing it, then it builds. So that's excellent point, thank you. Yes?
Question. So I do this thing where, let's say during the day, I'm really busy, stressful day at work, and I just feel like I need to go out and buy a cup of tea.
Yes.
And let's say there's 5 minutes to my next meeting, time is not enough, but I'm like, no, I have to get a cup of tea. And sometimes when I get my cup of tea, come back, I don't even finish it, like, is that moment?
It's not about the tea.
Yeah, like, it's not even.
It's the stick for the mind.
Okay, is that what it is? Is that?
It's
people
the same.
are-
I do the
my
same with
coffee is
coffees.
difficult.
My house is full of coffee cups, full of coffee that I have drank just like one sip. It makes me feel comforted. It's a distract, like it's something that's either it's warmth or the smell. There's something that makes you feel calm and ready to meet.
I was wondering if that was like a restore.
That time you take is that you took the time, you go, there's something about it, and so you gave yourself something, but something as simple as a cup of tea. We have like 4 minutes. I don't know what I'm hoping is that, so I'm gonna try again by 7:30 to give you back your papers, and then I'll wait for the ones on Monday morning, and then to wait for the ones on Thursday night. Would it be helpful to you to open up an office hour mid next week? So by the time you start thinking about the paper and
I would have liked to have organized an office hour with you, but I was just too drained.
absolutely. So let's just like wait a little bit. Please relax, and I am sorry if this was a bit more intense than you had planned for or anticipated. But this, yeah, and I also know this is not enough time to relax and recover. Oddly enough, as soon as you relax now, you have to go back and sort of do the thing. So for your exercise, remember it's a stop. Try to write down the overdoing behaviors. What do you overdo? So you can fill out those sides of the board.
That's for tonight, or?
That's for Monday morning. It's that little sheet with overdoing. All right. I hope, I will see you online maybe or over through emails, yeah? Very good. And thank you for being so open and vulnerable. I think it made the class what it was. So thank you for that.
Thank you.